So I don't know what that is.
Okay, welcome. It looks like we're live. So are you still hearing the echo, Chris, in my voice?
Yeah, it's still echoing and catching a bit. Yeah, that may be a micro, but
okay. So let me see. Take the volume down. Welcome, everyone. Well, you know how it is with technical, but you know we're not going to let that stop us. Not at all. We are going to push forward regardless. Let me see, because I still haven't figured out the volume thing, so I'm going to get that together. So let's just do that. It's the fun world of being virtual and being live. Right? Okay, let's see. Is it still echoing? It's not going down. Hold on. What does that sound?
no, it's like a feedback. It's like another microphone is catching your voice at the same time.
Really?
Maybe you have to mute the mic on your computer if are you using a handheld mic or a stand mic?
I'm using like a podcast mic.
Okay.
Well, you know, we are live, so welcome to everyone and anyone who could be on. It's okay. We're giving everyone a few more minutes to kind of log in and kind of make sure that you know the technology is working right. So how did I still sound that way? I still sound funny, and I can't hear myself, which is interesting. Okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to ask you the questions, and I'll just let you do the talking because I know that you have quite a bit of information, you know, to update us with and the HR professional community. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and share our disclaimer because I definitely want to make sure that we're always just making sure that everyone knows that this podcast is provided for community building, educational purposes, and public policy awareness. It's not legal interpretation nor a policy from us. We like to create spaces where people can ask questions and really understand, you know, what is it going to take for you to find your HR advocacy voice and get engaged and get involved and help shape workplace workplace here in the United States, at least, right? So here in Indiana. So, Chris, how are you doing today? What's been going on?
Sure. Well, quite a bit here. I want to talk about a couple things. First, some pieces of legislation that we've talked about on previous podcasts that SHRM worked very hard on, that I advocated on personally with the Indiana delegation earlier this year, working to get these bills out of committee and onto the floor. And so so I'm going to talk about those. We also have an election. So we're effective today. We're only 20 days out. So I think everybody can finally, I wonder how many people are saying right now in their head, thank God it's almost over.
20 days though. 20 days is right around the corner.
Yes, it is.
Oh,
so
goodness.
I want to talk a little bit about what's going on within that and how things are kind of shaping up. And then I also want to talk about what we would likely see, at least in the early going of my understanding of the policies being promoted by former President Trump and Vice President Harris that would affect our profession. So I'm referring here to statements they've made on the trail, commitments they've made, right? Promises, if you will, I think is how Vice President or former President Trump refers to them. I believe he refers to them as promises. So I want to talk about those too, and to get a sense of that, right? So okay. I want to start out with the legislation. So there were two pieces of legislation that we were working on pretty hard. HR 6655, the Stronger Workforce for America Act. And this had to do with the big federal contribution that goes to workforce development allocations to the states that they can then use for their own purposes. And then most of the states also take a portion of that money and send that down to the counties, right?
And what is that? And what's the bill called again? HR
6655.
6655.
HR stands for House Resolution. Yeah.
Okay.
6655. And then they all have their own titles, right? So this one was Stronger Workforce for America Act. So the titles are usually interesting in and of themselves. So sometimes they're accurate and sometimes they're actually the opposite. But this one's probably closer to accurate in terms of naming. But basically, this has to do with what was formerly called WIOA authorization, right? So when when this plan first came into, I think Wyoa was Clinton, second term Clinton, if I recall correctly. And so this was federal money that would go to states that states would use for workforce innovation. And this was when it was first identified that part of the unemployment challenge that the country was experiencing was that there was a skills and experience gap between what employers needed and what the workers who wanted jobs actually had. And so this was the federal government's way of trying to tackle that. And so they called it, that was called the Workforce Optimization and Innovation Act, Opportunity and Innovation Act. And so that was a giant pile of federal money, right? So that went to each state, and then the states had the obligation to operate programs to achieve that federal aim, right? So it was federal money to the states, and the states had the responsibility for executing them. And then some states even pushed that down to the county level, and Indiana did that also. So this is going on for a long time. But like every other funding bill in the United States, especially when it's a new one, they put in place what's called a sunset provision. And what a sunset provision means is that unless Congress affirmatively acts to either codify that money into law or reauthorizes it for some period of time, then the money will go away, right? The authorization, the ability for the federal government to send that money to the states would evaporate, right? Yes. And so that's what happened with Wyoa. So through the first two iterations of Wyoa, Congress acted at the last minute to basically kick the can down the road 4 more years and keep the money going, right? Yeah. So as you can imagine with 2 iterations, that everybody was kind of getting worn out, right? Because on one hand, after 12 years, it's kind of expected, right? You see what I mean? The states have built out these units that they fund with this money. They have programs, they have plans. They've been doing this for a while. And so kind of, what are we doing here? Just kicking the can. I mean, if this is working, we should just do it, right? Yes. So this bill right here is the vehicle that would codify that Wyoa program into law. And basically that it would be there and be funded, and then Congress would just vote occasionally to either increase those amounts or not. Okay. So just to clarify. And generally speaking, once Congress does something like that, they vote to increase the money about once every 15 years. Oh, goodness. So I'm sorry, what was the question you were going to ask? I cut you off. So no, I think that's great that you clarified that, because I think that what I was thinking, it was just that what we were looking for was just reauthorization, but it's not necessarily reauthorization that we're pushing for it to be codified. This bill's supposed to supplant that. I mean, it's basically codify it, right? That's exactly it. Okay. So SHRM was behind this bill. I think it's a good bill. It passed with true bipartisan support. When I say bipartisan support, I don't mean Washington, D.C. style bipartisan support, which is, 15 Republicans and 1 Democrat, or 15 Democrats and 1 Republican, man. I mean, no, this was broad. As a matter of fact, in the committees where these bills were, every single representative in Indiana who was on those committees, and I'm talking here like Banks, Spartz, Mervan, Bouchon, Houchins, regardless, they all voted for it. So all the Indiana delegation voted for this, which I was really pleased with, because that's who I was working, right? I mean, that's who, when I was going to DC and talking to them, I was constantly bringing this bill up and talk about why it's good, why they support it, and et cetera. So I was very proud, that the Indiana delegation ran the table on the thing. But it was the same way with members of other delegations. They didn't even have no votes on these things. I mean, the Democrats, the Republicans all voted for it. And so that's why I was really confident, it would pass on a floor vote. Unfortunately, because this is an election year, there wasn't enough work done, right, between when the bill was introduced in January, and when it finally got hearings and they did all of the work you need to do to get the bill out of committee, it was just too late, because in an election year, every House member is running for their seat. 100%, right? 100% of the House is up and 1/3 of the Senate is up. And so once you get into the summertime, right, it starts, people start needing to miss more time to campaign. And once you get past Labor Day, good luck, right? I mean, even getting forms, because everybody's trying to win their job back.
That's right. That's right. So they're not, focused on anything else yet until they get into the position.
Yeah, I mean, there are people in safe seats and they could win dead,
Well, then I have a question, Chris.
Yeah.
So then what, so since this is something that's getting both bipartisan support, what can HR professionals do in this space? Does that mean that, we do anything? Go ahead. So
for right now, no. Now, if this bill were going to pass the House and be sent over to the Senate, if it was coming up for a floor vote, then we would be calling, our delegation and asking for the vote, which, by the way, I think we'd mostly get, since about 7 of them voted for it in committee. They're not going to vote for it on the floor, right?
Yes.
So it would be a short putt, right? It would be a short putt. But that's what we would be doing. We would be sending out, well, actually, SHRM would do it. They would send out a letter saying, hey, call your representative, ask for their vote on this bill. It's coming up for a floor vote this week. Right. So that's the kind of thing that usually comes from SHRM. So we would be doing that. But in this case, that's not going to happen, because they aren't going to get quorums to vote. So here's what this means. When this year comes to an end, this particular session of Congress will also end. And so under law, everything that was started within this Congress, and each Congress is 2 years, right? So each Congress is 2 years. And so anything that starts in those 2 years must complete and be signed into law, or everything gets zeroed out and it starts all over again. Okay.
Yes.
So now, this is not unusual. This happens all the time. It's very, very normal for bills to get partially through the process.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't come up. And there's all kinds of reasons why it doesn't come up, right? Maybe it passes the committees, but the Speaker of the House doesn't want to bring it to the floor, or maybe they've got other things they want to bring to the floor, or maybe something else is going on. So there's a million ways for legislation to die, right? Just a million ways, and that's the way the framers designed it, by the way. So what will basically happen is that these bills will not make it out of the House, and so when we start a new Congress in January, they are going to be reintroduced. And they'll go through the whole drill. But because they've been already passed out of committee, and since I would expect the committee structure to be more or less the same, it's highly unlikely they wouldn't get through those committees lickety split, right? Because 2/3 of the people have already voted on it, right? 6 months ago. So I would expect this to get into committee, get out, to be available to be up for a floor vote pretty early, like within the first quarter of next year. And then it's a matter of getting it to the floor. And that's really hard to do, because that's the Speaker's decision, right? And
yes,
I don't have, and no HR advocate in the country has the juice to persuade the Speaker of the House. This is not going to happen. So
I did hear how you said that.
Way beyond our pay grades, right? But nonetheless, I would expect that to happen, because it's a bipartisan bill. And one of the things, especially coming out of an acrimonious election, very polarized election, I could easily see the Speaker, regardless of who the Speaker was, right? Whether it was Hakeem Jeffries or whoever the Republicans want, if they don't want Mike Johnson again. Bring this bill forward just for the sake of being able to pass something bipartisan to prove the American people that Congress can work together on something. I mean, I could see that happening. Or I'm not saying it would, but I could see that happening. Now, But the key thing is it's got to get out of the House. Both of these bills I'm talking about are House resolutions. So they got to get out of the House. And then once they get to the Senate, they will be assigned to a committee. And then we start the work on working on that committee. Now, if there is an Indiana senator on that committee, then whether it's Todd or who I expect, well, I'll talk about this in the election. I do expect Jim Banks to win. If either Banks or Young was on that committee, then we would be calling on them, right, to persuade them to vote for this bill.
Yes.
And then it's got to get out of the Senate committee, and then it's got to get voted and onto the floor. And you hope they don't make any amendments, because if they do, then it's got to go back to the House to be considered for that. And then we start working on that all over again. And then if the House agrees to it, fine. And the Senate agrees to it, fine. Then it can make it to the president's desk. So I feel pretty good that both of these pieces of legislation can get done in the next 2 years, right? 25 and 26.
And HR 6655 is just a stronger workforce for America, but that there's a different one for Pell Grant, for the workers grant. That's another.
Yeah, there's another one. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about that next. So the other piece of
okay.
legislation is in the same boat. So everything
Okay.
I said about the other bill is also true for this one. Very, very same characteristics. Now,
Okay.
this one, another bill pushed really hard, also has bipartisan support, yada, 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 all that stuff. And what this basically does is alter the Pell Grant Act, right? So most people watching this or listening to it later will know that Pell Grants are government grants that are directed toward people of no means, basically, very, very poor, needy people, and it pays for their 4-year college education. Okay.
Yes.
So what this workforce Pell would do to say, hey, you could also use this if you were enrolling in a career and technical education program that provided 150 to 600 clock hours of instructional time, and you can then use Pell money for that. And that wouldn't be nearly as expensive as the 4-year grant, right?
Yes.
Because most of these technical programs, you're out in 18 to 24 months, right? They are highly focused, intense programs, right? There's no day,
yes,
not many days off and all that stuff. My son went through a technical program. He did it for 2 years, and he had like maybe 6 days off a year, and that included Christmas and Easter, right? So otherwise you go, he had Sundays off. Yeah. He had Sundays.
Wow.
So these are intense is my point.
Yes.
But they don't cost as much as a 4-year degree at a college because they're only in for 2 years. So, but here's the thing, you have to actually alter the Pell Grant and allow the money to go in that direction rather than to a 4-year institution. Okay.
Yes.
So SHRM, big proponent of this, same for me, big proponent of it. But it's not going to get done this year. There's just not enough time. Right.
Now, because this is not about pouring more money into something. This is just about reallocating the money.
So they did so within the budget. Well, I can't say budget because we haven't done a budget for 18 years. Within the continuing spending resolution.
Oh, goodness gracious.
One of the spending resolutions we did had a markup of more money for Pell.
Okay.
So they did put more money in Pell to help float this. Now,
Okay.
there was a big fight over that, right? Because, you know, there's folks who think we spend too much money and folks who think we're too cheap. And both of them have votes. so it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge.
Yes.
But this is another one that I expect will actually get done within the next 2 years. And quite frankly, I expect both of these to get done. Pretty much regardless of who's president.
Okay. Now I was trying to look for the regulation for the law. Do you have the
that's HR 6585. Is that
HR 6585? Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what's the word that I should be, because I guess I keep stumbling at that. I want to say regulation, right? Policy, regulation, proposed regulation.
It's a bill.
It's a bill. Okay.
No.
It's a bill.
Yeah,
That's the word I'm looking for. Okay.
So we call them bills, right?
Okay.
But they are technically House resolutions.
Okay.
Right.
And
So
this
it's a
is the
House
workforce.
resolution or it
Okay.
says Senate resolution, but they are commonly referred to as bills. They're referred to as bills multiple times in different places. So the vernacular term is bill. But if
Okay.
you were like to look it up, like on Google or something like that, you would want to put HR 6585 to land exactly on that bill, right, for that search term.
Okay. Yes. So I'm going to put this on here just in case anybody wants to research.
Yeah. And then when you're actually trying to move bills through the process, and this will come up more in the Indiana General Assembly than it will in Congress, the bills are technically referred to as vehicles. So,
Vehicles. Okay. So then that's good. That's good. Okay.
so
Because we wanted to take off. Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of inside baseball.
And I guess that's why sometimes they try to add stuff to the trunk of the vehicle.
Yeah. If you're working on the inside of the machine like I do and like you do, then that's the terminology, that's the language used by the people who we talk to, right?
Okay.
The legislators, the staff, people like that. That's their interior term. They know exactly what that means. But from a citizen standpoint, from a typical advocacy standpoint, if you walked into any office and said, "Hey, I want to talk about Bill 6585," it's not like they're going to look at you and say, "What are you talking about?"
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They'll know, and they're not going to correct you. Right? I'm just saying this is the technical. This is the technical term. Precisely because when I do my presentations, I do assume that people will look stuff up, not just take my word for it, right? Look it up. So I tend to put in exactly what it is, so that if people Google it or try to look it up, that their search won't go wonky. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Yeah. So that kind of gets us through that and the status of that stuff. Too bad we couldn't get it across the line, but neither one of these bills started until this year.
Okay.
It's always tough to get it done in only 1 year, but next year is clean because it's nobody's up for re-election. I mean, it's just nothing's going on.
Okay, gives us a break. Yes.
And they should use most of the working days. I mean, they'll use the working days, right? So yeah.
Okay. And so then what can HR professionals do in this space? Is there anything to do? Because I mean, the acts is bipartisan.
Other than just understand where they are, what's happening. If you hadn't heard anything from SHRM, this is why. Right?
Okay.
And don't be surprised if you don't start hearing about it again. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought that was last year. Well, it's a new Congress. So.
That's right.
You got to start the process all over again. It just should be faster this time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it should be faster, right? Because but
as long as nothing goes squirrely with the committees, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the risk, right? That in the committee assignments.
Because this is something that will help America. I mean, for sure, right?
Well,
I mean, help us with the workforce.
I agree. I
agree,
but you got to understand that. I mean, this is bipartisan. I haven't heard anybody really oppose this per se, but I will say this: the point you just brought up is a relevant one, right? Because this Pell Grant one, we tried to get it done earlier and we couldn't because the chair of the committee didn't want. No, the chair of the committee was fine with it. The ranking member was not. Okay, so you know what I say? Do you know what I mean when I say ranking member?
Yes. So they're not. They're below. I mean, not to say below, but hierarchical. They're below the chairman.
They are the most tenured.
Tenured. Okay. Yes.
So a ranking member in a committee would be the one who's been there the longest.
Okay.
So each party has a ranking member, right? So there's a Democrat who's been there the longest. There's a Republican who's been there the longest. And by convention, okay, so this is not codified into how Congress operates.
Okay.
But by convention, neither party's committee chairs would lightly take putting before the committee for a vote a bill that the ranking member opposed.
That really? So,
Oh, yeah.
so let's talk about the power that the ranking member has. Like, what exactly, what is their
Not
power?
it's not power, it's influence.
Okay.
The
Oh,
committee
influence.
the committee chair has power. Okay, has power.
Yes, has power, but
The ranking member has influence.
okay.
Okay, so there's a distinction there.
Yes.
So that's all I'm saying is by convention, they tend to give deference to the most senior member on the team. The most senior member in their caucus is saying hell no. By and large, most committee chairs will not, cross them.
Okay, and this is within their party, the ranking member in their party. Okay,
absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
You don't care about crossing the other parties.
Okay, I just wanted to see just because I do hear a lot that, like, for example, for those at the Indiana General Assembly, they do, try to stress a lot that they do get along more than people think. So that's why I wanted to
absolutely do the way the media portrays the partisanship at the Indiana General Assembly, to me, is way overstated. Does it happen on certain bills? Yes. Okay. But I'm talking like 1 or 2 bills out of 500. And that's why I keep on saying time and time again, almost every single bill that passes the Indiana legislature for all kinds of stuff passes in very strong bipartisan fashion. Very rarely is it just one caucus, the Republican caucus, just absolutely bending the Democrats over. That does happen on bills that Democrats categorically oppose. Okay. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm saying that's like 1 bill out of 500.
And that's good to know. That's good to know because, you tend to hear people say, well, I don't want to get involved because I don't want to be political. Well, it's not necessarily the case that it's so political. Get involved, get engaged, and you'll see what it's like.
It is not acrimonious at the state level. And quite frankly, in most states, that's the case. Now, there are some states where, quite frankly, their legislatures are kind of poisonous.
Okay.
Texas's can be that way. California's can be that way. They're the only really 2. Oh, New York. Okay. But those are the only ones that come to mind. I mean, all the others are they're there to do the people's work. I mean, these are part-time legislators, right? I mean, they show up, they do their job, they go back to their day job. I mean, they're not full-time. That's the other problem with California and New York. Those are full-time legislators, full-time. And Texas's legislature only shows up once every 2 years for like 45 days. I mean, they are there and gone.
It is so interesting.
Yeah, and the way Texas Constitution is drawn, the legislature has far more power than the governor does in Texas.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, I digress.
Okay. No, that helps understand.
My point is that's not Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
None of that is Indiana.
And I think I kind of took you off with the ranking member. So that's what we were kind of going down and trying to understand the power there. Yeah. But
but it's coming back to me now that we struggled a little bit on the Pell one.
Okay.
At the time, because the ranking member was opposed. And
why? I guess that was the question I was going to. Why would they be opposed to the Pell?
I don't know.
Okay.
And I'm going to say, and this is going to sound really rude.
Okay.
It was not my problem because the representative was from Virginia. So my counterpart in Virginia, that was his problem.
To try to figure out how to navigate that. Yeah.
I just do Indiana. I don't have stroke any place else but Indiana. So.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so the ranking member was from another state, and I'm like, okay, fine, not my problem.
Wow, now that is really interesting. So
now they did come around, but it slowed things down.
Okay. So then let's see, if you don't mind. So we're at like 429. I'm real brief, and then
move. So I want to talk about.
Well, I did want to quickly just bring up the event real quick, just kind of interrupt real quick, and just talk about the legal panel we have coming up. Because you will be a part of that as well, Chris. You know what? Let me take let me move the banner because your face is covered. Let me move that off real quick so that I can see your.
Okay. No, I'm fine. Go right ahead.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, so no, really excited because you're going to be a part of this panel, and so I wanted to take an opportunity on the podcast to promote this. We're excited. We're having a legal conference coming up November 13th from 7:30 to 9:30 a.m. And alongside with Chris Schrader will be Greg Grovera, Shelley Jackson, Shannon Middleton, and Brooke Salazar. We're looking to touch on the topics that are impacting our workplace and finding ways that we can find our way for how we want to advocate and get involved and get engaged. The key topics is the Chevron deference, restrictive law covenants, FTC and non-compete agreements, AI and HR compliance. And we know, like today, I think it was today or the other day, SHRM has been, SHRM at the national level has been providing public comments and, helping to shape AI in the workplace. So I'm looking forward to that conversation as well. EEOC updates, DEI compliance, AI and wellness, leave benefits, presidential influence, and whatever questions that you have that are impacting your workplace. Chris, is there anything that you want to add to this? We do have your promo that's coming, that's coming out with you.
No, actually, I don't. I mean, I think
okay.
We'll cover it. Yeah.
Okay, so then, so definitely register today at IndySHRM.org. Go to the events page, and you will find the legal conference there. And this is actually going to be provided at no cost. So definitely take advantage of this opportunity to stay in the know and figure out how you can get involved and make sure that you're, thinking of ways to get involved. Really? Okay, so there we go with that. So then you also mentioned today, Chris, that you presented today at the Wabash Valley.
I did a government affairs.
Wabash Valley chapter.
Did a government affairs update for the Wabash Valley RA group down in down and over in Terre Haute, from Bloomington. And great crowd today. Always enjoy presenting in Terre Haute. They're always a great group. And I talked to them a little bit about the election coming up. Like I said, we've got 20 days and we'll be done. What I want to cover here first is that, I've been through former President Trump's campaign information and the promises he's made, so to speak, to look through those to see what of those, if enacted, would affect HR, right? And the two the three that jump out to me, because he added another one. So one of the first ones was basically no tax on tips.
No tax on tips.
No tax on tips. Now, I was unsurprised he did this because the piece of legislation to tax tips passed in the Biden administration, and they didn't have enough votes to get over the line because there were 3 Democrats who were no on that bill in the Senate.
Okay.
And so Kamala Harris, as vice president, had to come in to break the tie. So she cast the decisive vote on that. So I was unsurprised that he put that out there, because from a campaign standpoint, he could say they weren't taxed before, but she did it, which is in essence what he's been saying, right?
Yeah.
So that was part of that.
Yeah.
So if we went to that, we'd have to, basically tips wouldn't be reported, right? I mean, that's all there is to it. People would just keep their tips, and that's that.
Okay.
The next thing he said, this was a new one since the last time we talked: no tax on overtime.
No tax on overtime.
No tax on overtime earnings. So this, of course, would require changes in our payroll programs and things like that to accommodate. And that might be a little exciting when that happens, but nothing that ADP can't figure out, right? Or the other providers couldn't figure out, right? It'd be a matter of suppressing a field once an hour overturned. And then the other provision he has is that he will absolutely not allow any increase in he won't cut benefits on social, or he won't push out or cut benefits on Social Security. So he does not want to move the age limit out, and he doesn't want to cut the benefits in any fashion whatsoever.
Okay, will not cut Social Security benefits.
Yeah, he doesn't want to do that. And so the implication is, well, if you don't do that, then you're going to have to raise taxes, right? Because the Social Security Trust Fund is currently projected to go bust in 2030 or 2028. So I think they moved it back. I think it's 2028 now. In any event, so they're going to have to find some way to raise revenue, right? And how Congress has typically done it is all of the above. So usually what they do is they push the age limit out, and so that the benefits will stretch out, and then they turn around and do a tax increase on top of that. So that's how they've historically cured this depletion of the trust fund, so to speak. So if he's not going to sign anything that does that, then the only thing that's left is taxes. And the thing to remember about how Social Security is funded, right? That is a matching program. So taxes go up on the employees, and the same tax hits the employer.
Yes.
Right. So
yes.
So that's something to remember, though. So if you take those off the table, that's all you're left with. Now, he's not been talking about it like that, but that's the practical effect.
Okay.
Right? You know what I mean?
No. Yeah.
You have to come up with the money.
know.
Yeah, you have to come up with the money. They're not going to let it go bust. I don't think a political party could survive letting it go bust, quite frankly.
No,
it's the largest social compact we have. Now,
that's right.
I have personal opinions on how it's funded and how it's used and stuff like that, but that's neither here nor there. I'm saying it's the largest social compact we have, and I think any politician that would indicate that they'll let that die,
no,
just in neglect,
yes,
would probably lose power. So that's him. So with Vice President Harris, it's been a little bit more elusive.
Okay.
Really didn't put anything out for a long time. I mean, we did 2 podcasts and she still hadn't anything up. And so she finally got something out.
Okay.
And it looked pretty much like President Biden's plan.
Okay.
Pretty much. Okay. And she has talked about an unrealized gains tax.
Okay.
Talked about it. It got widely panned by a lot of economists because it would involve trying to tax you when you get taxed on unrealized gains. So I'll give you an example. The biggest unrealized gains that most Americans have is the appreciation in the value of their home, right? So they're in their home and the value of the house goes up, right? And so the difference between what you paid for the house and what it's worth is usually different, correct? It's usually higher.
Yes.
And the way we do taxing in the US currently is that the whole time that's been happening, right? Because it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time, right? The value of your house appreciates, and it kind of fluctuates, honest to goodness, right?
That's
It moves up and down, but the only time you would ever pay tax on that delta would be if you sold. If you sold. And then at that point, the government would say, okay, you owe us the capital gain now. You owe us the difference. But that would be at sale. So they don't tax it before that because it's a gain, but it's unrealized.
Yes.
It's on paper.
Yeah, because it's not, you didn't sell it to actually realize it. Yes.
Correct. Okay. So the same thing happens in our 401k accounts. The same thing happens in investing, right? All over the place. How we've always done it is a taxable event occurs when you liquidate. That's the best way to think about it, when you liquidate. Okay? So what Vice President Harris is proposing is that you tax the unrealized gains every year. Now, the way she's dodging the middle class is to say this would only apply to the most wealthy Americans.
Okay.
She has never defined what she means by wealthy. So I don't know.
Okay, because I was going to ask you that because somebody said it was like 100 million, some crazy high number.
They've thrown out high numbers. Okay. They've thrown out high numbers. So but I've heard that said. I haven't seen anything in writing, right?
Okay.
So Trump stuff is in writing. Now, whether that means he do it or not, I don't really know. But given my experience with him last time around, I would say it's more likely than not that some version of that happens, right? Because that was how he rolled last time, right? I'm just basing it on the last experience, right? So so she has said that. Now the challenge and what the concerns are with that is that of course, depending upon where that hits, that could hit certain executives in our companies. And
that could.
and
Oh wow.
effect,
Okay.
which might actually change their compensation structure at the company, right? So that would be a call out for us because usually we're
Okay.
involved in comp, right? So that's how I could see that trickling down.
Okay.
Another thing that's
Okay.
got people worried is that it would, if passed, let's just say it passes and it applies only to the very wealthiest people making 100 million or more.
Okay.
Let's just say that,
Mhm.
right? What a lot of people are concerned about is when the US income tax was passed.
Mhm.
At the time it was passed, it got Republican votes to pass under a specific provision.
Okay.
It would never apply to anyone who wasn't a millionaire.
Okay.
Is that how the tax code works today?
No, I mean, okay.
Who's taxed? Just about everybody. You see what I mean?
Yes.
You see what I mean? And so you have a lot of folks on the Republican side saying, we fell for that once. We fell for that once. Actually, the Republicans fell for it twice. They also voted for Social Security under the provision that the tax would never, under any circumstance, ever, 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 ever be more than 2%.
Oh gosh.
You see where I'm going with this?
Yes.
So the Republicans they see something like this and they just break out into freaking hives, right? Because they're like, we've fallen for this before. That's not how it ever ends. It starts like this and it ends like this. So hard pass now. So she's thrown that out. And I think it's pretty smart of her to do that politically.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because one of the things happening in the US, as I'm sure everybody has noticed, is that the populists have gained an awful lot of ground. The populists have pretty much all but taken control of the Republican Party. And they will probably take control of the Democrat Party within another cycle, I would guess.
And I know you talked about in one of our in one of our episodes, past episodes, but if you don't mind briefly defining that.
The Republicans are just farther ahead on the curve. That's it. Yeah. So in the United States, we have had this happen all throughout our history, right? So we have these waxes and these wanes of populist movements taking control of parties, usually for some period of time. And then they fall out of favor, and then a new establishment arises from that. And the establishment usually has a pretty long run. And then when the establishment fails, the populists come back, right? So Teddy Roosevelt was a populist. He's on Mount Rushmore. So, so when populists have their day in the sun, it's a rock and ride because they see things very, very differently. And the reason we are having a populist run now is the same reason we have always had a populist run in the United States. And it's when we run into great wealth imbalances.
Okay.
So are you aware of the Gini coefficient, Gini coefficient? You ever heard that before?
Gini coefficient.
So the Gini coefficient is like a poverty measure. And so what it does is look at the gap between the wealthiest and the poorest.
Okay.
So how big is that? From the very, very top to the very, very bottom, what's that gap?
Okay.
And if the coefficient gets out of whack, that's where you end up in trouble. And so in California, the state with the highest Gini coefficient, meaning the most in poverty and the people at the top making the very most, is California.
Oh,
California
really? California has
has
the
the
wealthiest.
starkest imbalance between the wealthy and the poor. And in
Wow.
California,
Okay.
there's the people who have it very well, and the vast, vast majority of people do not. Okay.
Hmm.
So every
Same
time in the
coefficient.
United States that coefficient has gotten out of whack, the people at the bottom know who to blame, and that's the establishment. Okay? 'Cause they're the ones
Right.
that
No,
built
I'm
they're the
laughing,
ones
but
that built. And by
yeah,
the way, this cuts
yes.
both ways. Notice
It's
here, I'm
the
not saying
establishment.
party.
Yes.
I'm not talking about parties here. I'm not
I know,
talking
but
about,
it's that word. It always gets me. The
yeah.
establishment.
Now, because in the United States we have a two-party system, the
Hmm.
way these movements manifest themselves politically is through the parties. Are you
Hmm.
with me? So that's the
Yes.
way it manifests. So we are in a deep, deep populist curve right now, where the Republican populists and JD Vance is a populist.
Okay.
So this is a guy, and he took a lot of beating, right? Because he came out, he had a poverty story, he joins the Marines, he comes out, he uses the GI Bill, he goes to Harvard, he becomes a hedge fund guy. I mean, he did that whole path. And
Mm.
once he got into the hedge fund world and saw how it worked, it horrified him, and he left and he began railing against them. So he is a populist, right?
Okay.
So
Okay. Okay. That helped me. Helped me to more context.
If you want to know one of the reasons why Trump picked him, that's a good one.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
because Trump can smell what's cooking, right? So on the Republican side,
Hmm.
now, on the Democrat side, the same kind of thing is going on, but the Democrat establishment is more entrenched, slightly younger than the Republican establishment. And the main reason the populists have made more inroads in the Republican, because a lot of the Republicans that have stood in the way died or retired.
Hmm.
Mitch
Wow.
McConnell is what, 90 something,
Yeah.
and he is not going to be the Senate leader if Trump wins. That's not going to happen. I don't know who it's going to
Yeah.
be. Not going to be him. So, but on the Democrat side, the establishment is a little younger and has all the money, so they've been able to hold him off. But one of the people to look at and watch, and I've said this for years, because she came on like a fireball, and I tell you, man, she's got it going. And that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
And that's what I thought you said, that she might be a possible voice for the Democrat Party, if that she might be the one.
The female voice. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if you look at Democrat policies, actually, one of the things that's going to happen in this election, nobody's talking about it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason they're not talking about it is they can't think a way to do it comfortably and not get set on fire.
Okay, and what is that? Okay.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and be willing to set on fire here. So what I think is going to be talked about after the election, not right now, but
Okay.
after the election, and what I think is going to be starkly apparent is the gender divide in the election.
Oh, okay.
Men for Trump, women for Harris, with some deviations.
Yes.
Okay? Some deviations. So if you are working class female of any race, married,
Mm-hmm.
odds are good you're going to vote for Trump. And if you're a union, odds are really good you're going to vote for Trump. So if you are college educated white female,
Mm-hmm.
Trump might get 4 votes.
Because I've heard that a lot in the news, that he's just not winning women.
Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Largely because for that group, and this is the other thing for these groups is very different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for the folks that line up behind Trump, the border is like the number one thing for them. And the economy.
The economy and the border. Yeah, those are the number 2 things.
Yes. Almost number 1 and 1A, right?
Yes.
And for college educated white females, the first, second, and third are abortion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, women's rights. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Depends
Yeah.
on how you take it. So
Yeah.
yeah. But
So
I'm just saying,
and then
I'm not value assessing here. I'm just
oh
saying.
no, but I mean, of course, because I'm a woman, I can definitely see why,
Right.
that just. But I'm curious about the state level as well. If you can kind of, kind of take that, because
So
there's Braun and McCormick.
I'm glad you brought that up. So
Okay.
there's another wrinkle I'm going to be looking for here, right?
Okay.
So one of the things that happens is that we tend not to have high turnout elections. And
Mm-hmm.
this one may be a little bit higher, but not as high as people think. And the media will
Okay.
again say, how was this possible with the literal republic at stake? And both sides say that, by the way, the republic is at stake. Both of them say that.
Mm-hmm.
So with that stake, how did we not have, this massive turnout? Again, it's going to be really low. It gets elevated in presidential years because there's a certain segment of voters who only vote in a presidential election. That's all they do. So every 4 years they show up. They don't do primaries.
No
They
locals.
don't interim election. Local. They do nothing. If the president's up for a vote, they'll come in. Now here's what I have observed about the general, not the specific. So in the specific, I could be very wrong, right? So I'm talking here in generalities.
Okay.
In general, that category of people who only show up every 4 years just when it's a presidential election tend to, whether they are Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter, tend to vote straight ticket party.
Okay. Because
Largely,
they're really not involved.
They aren't paying attention to anything else.
They're not. They're just picking who they tend to pick, the party they tend to pick.
They would like to be president, and then whichever ticket they're on, bang.
Okay.
That's it. So they tend to vote straight ticket. So where I'm going with this is, if the election day turnout, and keep in mind in the United States, we don't have election day anymore. We have election season.
That's right.
Election day is simply the last voting day.
The cycle. That's what they call it now. The election cycle.
Yeah, it's just last voting day. And let's face it, I'll use North Carolina as an example. They've been voting since September 9th, something like that.
Crazy.
Well,
I mean, the numbers are already in. Some of the numbers are in then. I mean, it to a degree
depends, right? It depends because the general, and again, I'm speaking generalities. Again, nobody yell at me about specifics. So I'm talking purely.
Put the disclaimer out. Yes.
High level general, as a general rule, more Democrats vote early than Republicans.
Oh, really?
Republicans are real big on showing up on election day in person, pulling the lever. Okay. I remember when I was growing up, I asked my dad, because I came from a politically active family, so everything I talk about here was just like our dinner table talk. Right?
It's in your blood. Yeah,
how I grew up, right? So yeah, if I could blame my parents for this knowledge, right? But anyway, when I remembered when the rules changed, and I was an adult when this happened. I was home visiting, right? And so when they started stretching out voting, and it just went out weeks and weeks, and Indiana is Indiana has a pretty short early voting in comparison to a lot of states, right? We have a pretty short one. But at any rate, this was happening all across the nation. And so I asked my dad about that. And I said, do you really think this will drive in more vote? Will this expand the vote by expanding the opportunity where we really get in people who were, for all lack of a different word, disenfranchised because they just couldn't make it to the polls that day or whatever, right? In the hospital or out of the country. Well, you could vote absentee if you're out of the country. You could also vote absentee in the hospital. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter.
So some people don't really realize that. They don't take it, they probably don't even know how to take advantage of that.
In any event, they just couldn't make it that day. And so, they didn't get to vote. And so I asked my dad, I said, is this going to expand it? Because that was the argument at the time, right? If we just opened it up and made it longer, more people would participate. The problem is we make it one day, and that's a problem.
Okay.
And so I asked my dad if we expand it. He said, no, I don't think it will. He said the people who were going to vote anyway will just vote. It just makes it more convenient. And And I said, okay. So I said, do you think that will work the same way for both parties? And he said, that's an interesting question, Chris. I don't think it will. And I said, why? And he said, what I've observed over the years about the Republicans, and keep in mind, I grew up in a Democrat family, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
This was his perspective from the Democrat side. And he just said, just what I have observed over my life of the Republicans and how they vote and kind of why they vote. He said, it's almost like a civic sacrament for them to show up that day.
I was going to say, because yes, it is. It's what they're promoting. Yes.
That's what that really resonated with me. Right.
Yes.
And so, and I think you see some of that because in the states that do early voting and count, because some states do early voting and count, some states do early voting and then don't count until election day, which is why it takes forever to get the vote.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that answered my question from earlier then. Okay.
Thank you, Pennsylvania. So anyway, yeah, get a Snickers bar. Pennsylvania's going to come in late. So unless there's just ungodly turnout, which is possible. But anyway.
Okay.
So it kind of resonated with me because as I started paying attention in later years, as more and more states did this, right? I can't think of any state that doesn't allow some form of early voting, right? Weeks or months, right? Some version of that. And I just started realizing that as I started looking at this in the states that counted ahead of time, they would make these consistent reference points to the Democrats were ahead in early voting. And I just hear that constantly. The Democrats are ahead in early voting. Okay. And then that's true, even if a Republican ends up winning the race. And that made me think that in the end, my dad was probably actually right about that.
It doesn't really make a difference.
The Republicans just voting day is on their calendar and come hell or high water. That's what they do.
They do it on that day.
Huh. Yeah. So that could have an impact. So, but the way I kind of see this, so if you asked me about Indiana, here's how I think it's going to go. In the last three, let's see here, Biden, Trump, Biden, and the one before that, Obama's second term. Yeah, Obama lost the state to Romney. That's right. Romney won Indiana for the second in Obama's second term. In Indiana, the Democrats for the last three cycles have really only reliably won three counties.
Okay.
Lake up near Chicago, Marion, and Monroe, where I live. And then occasionally they will steal West Lafayette, Lafayette County, Tippecanoe County, rather, Tippecanoe. Occasionally they take Porter or maybe Delaware, but that's it. That's just it. Okay. And when you can only win 3 or 5 counties, you can't win the state because there are 92 counties. And that doesn't work. Right? And even if some of the counties are lesser populated, you see what I'm saying, right? The math doesn't matter. And so because of that, the way that's gone, and in all kinds of polling, Trump has never been behind in Indiana. Mm-hmm. There's just no poll that's come out behind in Indiana. If he takes Indiana +6, right? And when I say by 6 percentage points, right? Uh-huh. If he takes it +6, pretty much all the Republicans win. If he takes it +5, I still think the Republicans win. I think Braun is going to win. I would not be surprised if Braun did not win by as much as Trump wins by. I would not be surprised. Would not be surprised, but I still think he'll win. Banks is going to win the Senate seat. I expect his vote to mirror Trump's pretty close. Okay. And everybody else, the Republicans will win their races is my current projection, with the only exceptions being Mervan in 1, which is dominated by Lake County, and Andre Carson in Indiana 6, which is dominated by Marion County.
Okay, so then you don't really see that kind of split that you were mentioning earlier when we were talking about.
No, even if it happens, well, even if Tippecanoe County, let's just say Tippecanoe County goes, that's not going to be enough to stop Jim Baird from getting reelected.
Oh yeah,
That
Jim
one,
Bairdson. Yeah, that's
they
my
won't do
area.
it. And Delaware won't stop. Who's Delaware? Is that Stutzman, or I think it's Stutzman. I could be wrong. It might be Sparts. It's not going to stop either one.
Okay.
Even if Delaware went, and this is not a year in which either one of those counties are going to go. It's just not going to happen. So, I also expect the Republicans to hold the General Assembly in both the House and the Senate again, and I believe they will maintain their supermajorities.
Oh, okay.
So it will be all Republican. Now, the interesting thing will be, it'll be very interesting to see the type of a relationship that Braun works to develop with the legislature, because Governor Holcomb originally had a pretty good relationship with the legislature, and that really soured over COVID.
Yes,
his COVID policies, and he never recovered from that.
No, he didn't.
I remember one Republican told me one time, he said to me about Holcomb, he said, "We wanted DeSantis, and instead we got DeWine, Governor DeWine, the governor of Ohio." And
goodness gracious.
Senator Holcomb used to consistently refer to what Ohio was doing. If you remember, during COVID, Governor Holcomb would consistently refer to what Ohio was doing and what Kentucky was doing.
You know what? I had to go back to work.
That's yeah. Anyway,
but I just remembered him always being on TV.
I remember that. So it'll be very interesting to see what kind of reputation, I mean, not kind of reputation, rather, but what kind of a relationship he seeks. I personally think he will seek an amicable one. You got to remember, Braun is first and foremost a very successful and effective chief executive officer.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally actually think he is far better suited to the governor role than to the Senate role.
Yeah. Okay.
Far better suited. I was unsurprised he did not have fun as a senator. Unsurprised. I expect Jim Banks to have a rocking time as a senator.
I'm really curious. Like, what's the thinking behind it? What's the science behind why you're saying that?
The Senate is not a place where things happen fast.
Okay.
The Senate was designed
for cooling of the waters, you had said.
Down. Yes, thank you for remembering that.
Yes.
They were to be, Thomas Jefferson. The Senate was supposed to be the cooling water.
Yes, okay.
The House is temper. So the House was supposed to be close to the people and reflecting what the Vox Populi wanted, right? And the Senate was to be the wiser heads and saying, okay, let's take a minute here. Let's just take a minute. And so CEOs are not take a minute people. You know, once they make up their mind, now they may be cautious, and most of them are pretty measured. I have met very few CEOs who I ever considered rash. They're not a rash group in my mind. They're measured, they're careful, but when they make up their mind, they are 1,000% decisive.
That's right.
And when they make a decision to move, it moves, and I mean now, right? That is not how the Senate works at all. And it's like, let's think about it some more. Let's talk about it some more. And Braun was like, we have and we have.
Well, then, okay.
What's holding us back? What's holding up the train, right? Come on, guys. Come on. We've talked this thing to death. I think everybody knows everything they're going to know.
Let's just take some action now.
Go on the road, and that's not how the Senate works. It just isn't, right? Yes. It's not designed that way. So I always thought that, wow, I mean, okay. I mean, if you can make that place move faster, power to you, but he couldn't. And that's because the institution, quite frankly, is bigger than anyone.
Not to do that. It's meant to move in slower.
Now, keep in mind, they can lose their minds. It does happen, right? Let's face it. They all voted on and thought it was a good idea to inter Japanese Americans for 4 years.
Yeah.
For no other reason than they were Japanese Americans.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
we didn't put him in concentration camps, but it
But
wasn't
you
nice.
know, we
It wasn't
yeah,
nice. It wasn't nice.
it wasn't nice. No,
They
I
were
watched that.
restricted. They were restricted.
Hmm.
So, even with all the safeties we have in place, right?
Hmm.
Stuff can get through. So yeah. So no, the governor of a state is de facto the chief executive of the state.
Okay. Okay. So
So and that's something that he's proven he knows how to do. So I
so
expect
no,
that.
so you don't really see, because I guess I was wondering with McCormick, with her used to being a Republican, I wasn't sure if that was going to
Yeah,
be
and that
her
was
or kind of.
and yeah, and that's why her support among Democrats is so tepid, because she was a Republican until 5 minutes before she wasn't. So
Hmm.
um and that is not to say I think she's just disingenuous. I do not.
Hmm.
I do
You're
not.
saying probably didn't
She
take
has proven, and
enough to build those relationships.
she has proven to be a better candidate than I thought she would be.
Okay.
Okay. And the
Okay.
Democrats, and she's getting money from outside the state.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
She's getting it from outside the state.
Well, that's
But
interesting though. Because
in a
what
presidential election year, in a presidential election year, last time in Indiana, Trump had coattails. I have no reason to think why he wouldn't this time either. I mean, the one thing you say about Trump is that he's a known quantity. What does anybody not
do?
know?
You get with him, right
Yeah,
now. I mean, yeah.
and so I guess he could win the state by a point or two less than he did last time, but I just don't see it. I mean, it could happen, but
Okay.
So
I know that we're up on the final. We're
yeah,
at the.
we're time.
But
So
I did have one question.
if you want to watch on election night, here I'll give you the code.
Okay.
This whole election is going to come down to 7 states and 48 counties.
7 states and 48 counties. Is that what you said? Oh, wow. That's okay. That is okay. And you have time to kind of, say, what 7 states are, but I don't know about the 48 counties.
You're gonna watch you watch Arizona and you watch Maricopa.
Okay.
You watch Nevada and you watch Clark County. In Wisconsin, I'd watch Waukesha and Fond du Lac, and I would in Ohio's just gone. Ohio's not a swing state. Sorry.
Okay.
Michigan, Wayne County. That's Detroit. Look for the volume of oil coming out of Wayne. If upstate votes hard, votes heavy. If outstate drowns Wayne, then Harris loses that state.
Wow.
And probably takes Elise Slotkin with her. She's running for Senate. So watch that. Yeah. So if Trump takes Georgia and North Carolina and Arizona and Michigan and Wisconsin, then he doesn't need Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But if he loses any one of those, then he's got to have Pennsylvania. He has to. I think this is coming down to Pennsylvania.
Because it seems like there's a lot of, they are in Pennsylvania quite a bit.
Yeah. So in Pennsylvania, you want to watch the counties up north in the Northeast. So Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, that area.
You said on the other side of the, what did you say? The other side of the mountains or on the mountains? Or?
Yeah, the east side of the Alleghenies.
Alleghenies, that's what it was.
So,
okay.
Yeah, because the Democrats cannot win the west side of the Alleghenies, the part of the state that the Pennsylvanians call Pennsyltucky. They cannot win. They're not going to win a single county west of the Alleghenies. They're just not. That's Trump territory, solid. So, and they will win the Southeast. So Philly, right? They will win that. But if the working class Northeast goes for Trump, and it quite likely can, if it does, and it's enough
Mm-hmm.
to offset part of Philly and that populous part of the state down there, that combined with Pennsylvania shoves Trump over the line in Pennsylvania.
So this is really just a very, very tight.
If, right? So a lot of ifs here. And I could easily see Harris narrowly winning Wisconsin the way Biden did. I could easily see Harris winning Michigan narrowly the way that Biden did.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that happening. What concerns me about her winning those states is that she's only ahead by half a point or a point in those states.
Yeah, very close.
At the same time in the last election, Biden was up 7 and 8 respectively.
Wow.
And only
I think the two topics that you
only won by 1 point in the end. So he was up 7 and 8, and in the end, really only won by 1. And so where he was 7 and 8, she's like 0.5 and 1. So that makes
that's very tight.
That makes me think that number's soft. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Makes me think that number's soft. So what do I know, right? But if election night is your thing and you want to pop the popcorn and watch it, that's my advice. Watch
it. So I have one last before we have. Now, I think it wouldn't be. I wouldn't be. I wouldn't feel right if I didn't ask this question, because I did hear this on TikTok recently, and I just thought, what? I just kind of like be concerned about this. So, have you heard of Project 2025?
I have.
Okay, and then what I'm hearing is they're saying that she's like an attorney, a young attorney from Harvard or something, and she's saying that SHRM deference is a part of the Project 2025, the dismantling of.
Who is?
The Chevron deference is one of the
yes.
Is one of the symptoms or one of the consequences of what has happened from Project 2025. And so then it makes me think, like, if that is the case, or if there is some correlation to, because it's too many pages to read the Project 2025.
Okay, so let me say this about the so-called Chevron deference decision.
Yes.
A lot of people thought that was wrongly decided at the beginning.
Really?
Long before Project 2025 ever came around.
Okay.
You can find legal arguments against Chevron deference and why it was wrong, going all the way back to the year it was decided. I mean,
okay.
That's you got to remember too that Project 2025, that blueprint that I think that was the Heritage Foundation, right? So
the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah. So Heritage Foundation puts those out like every 2 years, right? I mean, that's what think tanks do.
And that's right.
Think tanks on the left and think tanks on the right all do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so, yes, without a doubt, I'm sure, knowing the Heritage Foundation, I have no doubt in my mind that getting rid of that, was important. But that was the Supreme Court decision, not that. Okay. That was a legal decision. That wasn't. But at any rate, I think the broader issue there is there was a long-standing attempt that is still going on by the Democrats to attempt to tie Trump to Project 2025, to basically say that his blueprint, and he has said many times that that's not the case. And what his blueprint, what he wants to do, has been on his website for a long time. Now, is there some overlap? Probably. I mean, probably, but no.
But isn't it something that HR professional, like, is this something that HR professionals should be considering?
It's a wish list. It's a wish list, right?
Okay.
So again, think tanks are think tanks, right? And again, they're on the right and left. So everybody's talking about this one now. Do the think tanks hold symposiums? Do they hold engagements? Do they hold conferences? Do they invite members of Congress to come? Yes, of course they do.
Of course they would, because why would they do it? Yeah. Yeah.
Do they attempt to persuade the same way I do?
Yeah. I mean, yes.
Yes, it's what they do.
Yes.
It's what they do. They crank out policy. They are policy shops. That's what they do. So I personally, when everybody started railing about Project 2025, I mean, I'd heard about it just like I'd heard about Project 2023 and Project 2020. I mean,
Oh, really? Wow. So there were that many projects.
years like clockwork for like the last 20 years. I mean, so I was like,
wow.
And most of them are kind of similar to the prior 2 years. Sometimes stuff comes off and sometimes new stuff comes on, but there's always like a core of stuff that is the same, right? I mean, because these are their principles, right? Principles generally don't change much. And so when they first started talking about it, I was like, you mean the one that came out last year? Because here's the other thing. They put them out like 2 years in advance, right?
Okay.
The Indiana Chamber of Commerce does the same thing. They do
every advocacy
2020.
You'd create some stance that you believe in, so then you're able to talk to.
They were intended as visionary documents.
Yeah. Okay.
They were intended as visionary documents. And so when everybody first started talking about it, I was like, you mean that thing that came out like a year ago? I mean, is that what everybody's talking about? Or they think about the same thing? I was like, because there's nothing new here. I mean, as a matter of fact, if you go back and look at all the other ones they've done, it's about a 90% overlap, right? I mean, they've been saying this for decades. And so I was pretty surprised at the time. And then I finally realized I'm one of the only people that actually tracks this stuff, apparently. And so it was new to a lot to right, is what it was.
Because it was new to me too, but I kind of didn't really pay too much attention to it. But I did pay attention when the young lady mentioned the Chevron deference, and I thought, wait, what? We're talking about Chevron deference. I wanted to make sure I understood.
Yeah. So generally speaking, if you want to look at the Brookings Institution, have you heard of them?
No, I haven't. The Brooklyn, you said?
Brookings Institution.
Brookings. Okay.
Brookings Institution is a long-standing center-left policy shop in Washington, D.C. They produce a very similar visionary document, right?
Okay.
The Public Policy Project, I think that's what it's called. I can't remember. That's a think tank on the left. They crank out this stuff too. And the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian think tank, also cranks out their stuff. And maybe it's just because I was in DC for 17 years, but it was just like, this is what these people do. I mean, they do it all the time. I mean, that's why I think my reaction was so different. I was like, this is kind of what they do. I mean, you do know that they all do this, right? I mean, it's how they operate.
And I think that's why I love our podcast so much, Chris. I mean, honestly, because I think that sometimes when we don't know, we think that something's new, and we think, oh my God, why is this happening? Like, this is so weird. What's going on?
Well, this is kind of what this is. I will equate this to what I say to my college students, because when I talk to them, you're going to be going to the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I want you to do is you're going to see something going on, and you're going to have this great idea to solve this problem. And you're going to want to go to your boss and tell him you have this great idea and you want to do it. And your boss is going to listen to you and say, yes, we actually thought about that. Mm-hmm. We tried that. It didn't have the effect we intended. And I said, in that moment and at that time, you're going to think that they are shooting you personally down because it was your idea. And it's very hard not to personalize that, right? Very hard not to personalize that. It came from a good place. You wanted to demonstrate that you care, that you're on the ball, you're trying to do something for the company. So your motivation around this is about as pure as driven snow, right? And they're just going to shoot you down. And in that moment, you're going to think, my boss doesn't value me, doesn't care about my ideas, and all this other stuff. No, that's not what happened. What happened was new to you doesn't mean new to the company.
That's right. That's right. That's
so don't
right.
take it personally.
That's
don't
right.
Take it personally.
Don't take it personally. Get involved. Get engaged. Start getting curious about things.
This is one of the reasons why I ask him a series of questions, and I say, can you tell me first recorded use of a scalpel? And of course, they all think the metal ones, right? So they always guess like, must have been like Civil War area. Certainly it was maybe the 1700s, the 1700s, right? So they were doing metal, maybe even further back in that, maybe back in the Middle Ages. No, you got to go back to Rome, BC 3-5. By the way, hemostats, to clamp off veins.
Yes.
Yeah. That was Rome 35 also. First use of metal staples to close a wound instead of animal sinew that would get infected. Rome.
Wow.
Yeah, they didn't have the technology. Their scalpels were for crap. They were big. They were ugly. They had a hard time keeping them sharp.
I can imagine what it looks like.
Yeah, if you look at the artifacts that were found, everything looks big and ugly.
Oh,
but when you look at it, you kind of know what it is. So what I'm trying to say is that everybody past before us was pretty freaking smart and had pretty damn good ideas and figured a lot of things out. What they were lacking was the technology.
Yes. Yes.
We're not smarter. We just have better tech.
I agree. I think our technology has gotten smarter.
Yeah, we got to go. All right. Well, thank you very much.
We definitely do have to go.
Yeah. Okay, so then next month we'll know who won the election, and we'll start to be able to talk about policy.
That's right. Because the next time we meet, it'll be the day of the actual legal conference. So I guess we can determine what that looks like, because I know that there's going to be a lot of travel that day as well. As far as maybe we'll just maybe let that day go.
We're doing the legal conference in the morning, right?
Yes, we're doing it in the morning. So I wasn't sure what your travel.
We can do it in the afternoon. Yeah,
okay, you still be fine. Okay. So then, because I'll be excited. Yeah, I think this will be great. We'll definitely be able to touch base on who the president is, and then kind of get a better idea. And I definitely want to pick your brain.
We'll talk about that at the legal conference very much.
No, because we won't talk about that. We'll talk about presidential influence. So maybe at some point it might, but not really. We can jump into it deeper. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today. Definitely would like for you to share your feedback. What is it that you would like to see, learn a little bit more about? And then, of course, we would love for you to register for the legal conference coming up November 13th at Kittle's property from 7:30 to 9:30 a.m. that morning. So until then, bye, everyone.